Chapter 8, The Smell of Earth. By morning, the chair was gone. Just gone. No sign of it anywhere in the house. Not in the kitchen, not in the attic, not even outside. It was like it had been swallowed whole. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, that maybe I'd imagined putting it there. But the indentations on the wooden floor said otherwise. That's when the smell started. At first, it was faint, like damp soil after rain. Not unpleasant, just out of place. But within hours, it grew thicker, heavier. The whole house began to reek of wet earth. And something else underneath it. Something sweet. Rot. I followed the scent to the air vent near the base of the basement door. The odor pouring through was so strong it burned my throat. I gagged, turned away, and then I noticed something dark trickling out from under the doorframe. It wasn't water. It was thick, sticky, almost black. I knelt down and touched it with a tissue. It smeared like oil, but when I lifted it to my nose, that smell hit harder. Mud, decay, and faintly, the unmistakable scent of something once living. My phone buzzed then. A message from an unknown number. Chapter 9, A Visit from Mr. Harrow. That evening, I saw Mr. Harrow again. Standing on his porch, staring directly at my house. He wasn't moving, just watching. I crossed the street to talk to him, desperate for answers. His face looked pale under the porch light, eyes sunk deep like he hadn't slept in days. "You've been hearing it, haven't you?" he said before I could even speak. I froze. "Hearing what?" He gave a hollow laugh. "You think it started with you? It's been knocking for decades." He motioned toward my house. Back when Ward lived there, he used to dig at night. Said he was trying to reach something. The last time I saw him, he was covered in mud, babbling about voices coming from below. "What happened to him?" I asked. Mr. Harrow's eyes flickered. "He went down there one night. Never came back up." I swallowed hard. "And the police? They sealed the place. Or so they thought." Then his tone changed, softer, almost pleading. "If you hear the knocks again, don't answer them. No matter what you think you hear, that thing doesn't just want out. It wants someone to trade places." He looked past me, toward the dark outline of my house. Chapter 10, The Photo Album. After Mr. Harrow's visit, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. It wants someone to trade places. The words crawled under my skin. That night, the smell of earth was stronger than ever. I tried to distract myself by unpacking the last few boxes in the attic. Old things mostly. Forgotten books, cracked picture frames, a broken lamp. But then, tucked behind a loose beam, I found it. An old, leather-bound photo album. The leather was dry and flaking, like it had been sitting there for decades. When I opened it, I nearly dropped it. Every photo was of the house. Not just the exterior, inside. The first few pages were harmless enough. The living room, the kitchen, the staircase. But the further I flipped, the darker the pictures became. The walls looked stained. The floors damp. And then came the basement shots. At first, it looked like dirt and stone. Until I noticed figures in the background. Pale, blurred silhouettes, half buried, half standing. Their faces, if they even had faces, were distorted by motion, like they were turning toward the camera. On the last page, there was one final photo. Someone standing at the bottom of the basement stairs, holding a flashlight, face obscured by shadow. But I recognized the jacket. It was mine. Chapter 11, Scratches on the Floorboards. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo me, standing in a place I'd never been. By morning, the house felt heavier, like the air itself had thickened overnight. Even the sunlight looked duller, weaker. I decided to stay upstairs, away from the basement door. But when I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something new. Scratches. Long, uneven marks running along the floorboards right up to the basement door. They weren't there before. I dropped to my knees for a closer look. The grooves were deep, splintering the wood, like someone had dragged something sharp across it again and again. But what made my stomach twist wasn't where they led. It was where they started. From inside the basement. I tried to laugh it off, to find some ridiculous explanation. Rats. maybe raccoons. Anything. But the marks were too deliberate, too human. That night, I moved a small dresser in front of the door. Then I sprinkled flour on the floor. A trick I'd read about online, to see if anything moves while you sleep. When I woke up around 4 a.m., the house was quiet. But the flour wasn't untouched. There were footprints. Bare. Small. And they stopped right beside my bed. Chapter 12, The Basement Key. By sunrise, I was done pretending this was all in my head. Someone or something had been inside my house. I tore through every room, every drawer, searching for an answer, a clue, anything that could make sense of what was happening. That's when I found it, behind a loose brick in the fireplace. A small, rusted key. It was old, older than the house itself by the look of it. Heavy, iron with a strange spiral carved into its handle. The same symbol from the blueprints. The moment I touched it, a chill ran up my arm. The metal was freezing, like it had just been pulled out of ice. I didn't want to believe what I already knew, that it belonged to the basement door. But my hand moved on its own, as if drawn by something unseen. I walked down the hallway, the key trembling between my fingers. The smell of earth was thick now, almost suffocating. When I reached the door, I hesitated. Then, slowly, I slid the key into the lock. Fit perfectly. There was a single metallic click, a sound that echoed through the whole house. Then silence. The door creaked, just slightly, as if something on the other side had heard it. And for the first time I realized, maybe the door wasn't keeping me out. Maybe it was keeping it in. Chapter 13, The Descent. For hours I sat staring at that door, the key still in the lock. The air around it felt colder than the rest of the house. Like the door was leaking something unseen, something ancient. By midnight I'd made up my mind. Fear can only build for so long before it curdles into curiosity. I grabbed my flashlight and turned the key. The door opened with a sound that didn't belong to wood. More like a groan, low and wet, like the earth itself was sighing. A wave of damp air hit me. It smelled of dirt and rust, and something else I couldn't name. The stairs leading down were steep and uneven, carved out of stone. I shone the light downward, and the beam disappeared into blackness halfway down, like the darkness was absorbing it. Every instinct screamed to close the door and run. But I couldn't. Something inside me, or maybe beneath me, wouldn't let me. Step by step, I descended. Each footfall echoed too long, like the sound was bouncing off walls that weren't there. Halfway down, the light flickered. Once, twice. Then I heard it. A whisper, so close it brushed my ear. Keep going. I froze. The voice was mine. Chapter 14, The Room Below. When my foot touched the last step, the ground beneath me felt wrong. Soft, almost spongy, like standing on soil that had never seen daylight. I swept the flashlight across the room. It wasn't what I expected. No shelves, no tools, no storage. Just walls of rough, cold stone. Moisture dripped from the ceiling, forming small puddles on the floor. The air was thick enough to taste metallic, earthy, ancient. And then I noticed the carvings. They covered every inch of the wall, spirals, circles, symbols that pulsed faintly under the beam. Some looked etched by hand, others by something sharper. In the center of the room stood a wooden chair, old, rotted, but upright. Beside it, an oil lamp long burned out. But what froze me in place wasn't the chair. It was what lay behind it. A patch of earth that looked recently disturbed, darker than the rest. Someone had been digging. My flashlight flickered again, and for a split second, I saw something glinting in the dirt, metal, curved, buried halfway. I knelt down, brushed away the soil, and froze. It was another key, identical to the one upstairs. And as I held it in my palm, I heard movement behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps. When I turned, the chair was no longer empty. Chapter 15, The Markings on the Wall. I dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled wildly across the floor, slicing through the dark, and for just a heartbeat, it illuminated the thing sitting in that chair. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. More like the outline of one. Made of dust, dirt, and something that pulsed faintly beneath the surface like embers dying out. When the light touched it, it crumbled slightly, but didn't disappear. I forced myself to move, to grab the flashlight again, and when I lifted it toward the walls, that's when I saw them, the markings. They weren't random. They moved. At first, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks. But no, the spirals were slowly shifting, rotating in opposite directions. The deeper I stared, the more they seemed to pull at my vision, like gravity made of light. Then one of them began to glow, just faintly, like a pulse beneath stone. And with each pulse, the air grew heavier. The whispering started again. Soft, layered, dozens of voices murmuring at once, rising and falling in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I stumbled backward, hitting the dirt mound behind the chair. The voices stopped. The light from the symbols dimmed, except for one right beside the door. It wasn't carved. It was freshly drawn. And below it, in shaky letters, was my name. Chapter 16, The Voice. First, I thought I was losing it. Maybe I wanted to believe that, because the alternative, that something down there knew my name, was far worse. I pressed my back against the cold wall, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam caught the edge of the name again. My name, freshly scratched into stone. The dust still clung to the grooves. Then a sound. It started as a low hum, deep and steady, vibrating through the floor. It wasn't mechanical, it was alive. The walls seemed to breathe with it, the spirals pulsing brighter in time with the sound. And then, through that hum, came a voice. Soft. Familiar. Why did you come back? My throat closed. It wasn't just any voice. It was mine. The same tone, the same inflection, except slower, deeper, like someone mimicking me from underwater. I spun around, shining the light in every direction. Who's there? I yelled. Silence. Then, almost mockingly, you said you'd help. The light flickered again. I caught a glimpse of something. A shadow on the far wall, tall and narrow, leaning slightly like it was listening. The hum stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, from right behind my ear, it whispered, perfectly clear, perfectly human. Don't look. Chapter 17, The Hidden Chamber. I did the one thing you're never supposed to do in horror stories. I looked. The flashlight jerked toward the sound before I could stop myself. The beam caught nothing but stone and shadow, though the air rippled slightly, like heat rising from asphalt. Then I heard it again. Not a whisper this time, but a faint, steady tapping. Somewhere behind the wall. Heart pounding, I ran my hand across the carvings until I found it. A section that felt different. Hollow. The moment I pressed against it, the entire slab shifted with a grinding moan. A hidden door, carved right into the stone. Cold air rushed out, and with it, that suffocating smell of damp soil and iron. I aimed the light inside. The space beyond was smaller, narrower, a chamber maybe 6 feet across. And inside, against the far wall, was a wooden table covered in symbols and wax. Ritual markings. Candles long melted into puddles of ash. Strange objects scattered across the surface. Feathers, teeth, and a journal half buried under dust. Something had been performed here. And then I noticed the floor. A perfect spiral drawn in black ash, leading straight to the center. Right where something round was buried, barely poking through the dirt. A jar. Inside it, something moved. Chapter 18, The Journal. My hands were shaking as I pulled the old journal off the table. The leather binding cracked when I opened it, releasing a smell of dust, candle wax, and mold. The handwriting inside was messy, frantic, desperate. At the top of the first page, a name, Elias Ward, the missing owner. Most of the entries were dated between 1980 and 1983. The first few pages were harmless enough, complaints about the humidity, the constant repairs. But then, the tone changed. The voice started again. Says it's beneath. Says I must dig. Page after page, his writing grew erratic. Words crossed out, symbols scrawled in the margins. The same spirals from the wall appeared again and again. It isn't death. It's a door. Something waits below. It remembers me. The final entry was almost illegible, but I could make out one line clearly. It doesn't want blood. It wants a name. I turned the page. There was a smear of something dark, fingerprints pressed into the corner. Beneath it, Elias had written a single question. If it takes my name, who will I become? A faint rustle came from the spiral on the floor. The jar in the dirt began to shake, the lid rattling. I stepped closer. Inside, pressed against the glass, was a piece of paper with my handwriting on it. Chapter 19. The thing beneath, 240 words. I froze. There was no mistaking it. The handwriting inside that jar was mine. Same crooked letters. Same looping R. But I hadn't written anything. Not yet. Before I could even process what that meant, the dirt around the jar began to shift. Slow at first, then faster. The spiral started to collapse inward, like something beneath the floor was breathing, dragging air, dust, and debris into itself. A deep, guttural noise followed. Not a growl, not even a sound you could name. It was like a thought made audible, echoing inside my skull. Then a voice, low, layered, ancient. He opened the door. Now it must be filled. My flashlight flickered violently, shadows crawling up the walls like living ink. The ground split open. Beneath the spiral I saw movement, arms or something like them, pale and sinewy, reaching upward. Every instinct screamed to run. But my feet wouldn't move. The air had weight thick, pressing me down. The jar cracked. A whisper leaked out. My name, spoken slowly, tasting every syllable. Ra-ana. The voice wasn't coming from below anymore. It was behind me. I turned and saw the outline of a face, half-formed in the air, wearing my own expression. Chapter 20. The mirror below, 240 words. My heart felt like it was slamming against my ribs. I stared at the half-formed face, its features shifting, flickering, as though it were trying on my identity, stretching and twisting in the dim light. Then it stepped forward, or seemed to. The air between us rippled, and the shadows bent. It moved like a reflection coming alive after dark. I raised my flashlight, hands shaking so badly it threatened to slip. The beam struck something behind it, a vertical rectangle framed in rough stone. A mirror? I couldn't believe it, but there it was, standing in the chamber, facing the spiral on the floor. Its glass was dull and hazy, streaked with grime, yet somehow flickered with a depth far beyond any mirror I'd ever known. The figure looked back at me, then turned toward the mirror. The moment it crossed the threshold, its reflection, or our reflection, rippled. The image in the mirror was me, but twisted, sunken eyes, skin mottled, features drained of life. As I watched, my own face in the glass flickered between myself and that pale, shifting entity. I took a hesitant step forward. Do I dare look into it fully? Before I could decide, the figure in the chair, or behind the chair, lunged. It slammed a hand on the mirror's surface, cracking it. The mirror shattered, shards of glass spun in slow motion, reflecting sparks of light. The broken reflections scattered across the stone walls, making dozens of distorted images. Me. It. Something in between. Something whispered from one of the shards, soft but urgent. Come closer. I knew it was a trap. But the pull, the magnetic lure of that mirror, of me in the glass. It drew me in, inch by inch, and then a piece of glass flew up, pierced the air, and struck my cheek. I recoiled, blood trickling cold. The voice roared in my ears, more real than before. Become me. Chapter 21. The Return of Mr. Harrow. The silence didn't last long. From above, I heard it, the unmistakable creak of footsteps. Slow, heavy, pacing across the floorboards directly above the basement ceiling. My heart clenched. I hadn't told anyone I was here. No one else had a key. I pointed my flashlight toward the stairs, but before I could move, the beam dimmed, as if the air itself was draining it. Then, from the doorway, I saw it. A faint glow, lantern light, and a silhouette. Broad shoulders, a long coat, a limp. Mr. Harrow? I whispered before my brain could stop my mouth. He didn't answer, just stood at the top of the stairs, his face lost in shadow. Then he began to descend, one step at a time, the wood groaning beneath each movement. When the light finally touched him, my stomach dropped. His eyes were open, but empty. His skin was pale, stretched thin, and his lips moved soundlessly. He wasn't breathing, yet he kept coming. In his left hand he held something, a small jar, the same kind I'd seen earlier. Inside it, something writhed, pressing against the glass like it wanted out. He reached the last step and raised his head. "You shouldn't have opened it," he rasped, voice barely human. "It's awake now." Chapter 22, The Awakening. The entire house began to tremble. Dust fell from the ceiling in soft clouds as the lights above flickered and died. Mr. Harrow stood motionless, the jar in his hand pulsing with a faint, sickly glow. Then came the sound, a low, rhythmic thud from beneath the floor, like something enormous was stirring below the foundation. Each impact sent a tremor through the walls. "It's not just a house," Harrow whispered, eyes fixed on the spiral. "It's a mouth." Before I could respond, the dirt inside the spiral began to move. Slowly, deliberately, it sank, as if the ground itself was inhaling. The markings around it lit up with a dull, red shimmer, glowing through the cracks. The jar in Harrow's hand started to shake violently. The glass cracked, releasing a shrill, ringing sound that stabbed through my skull. I covered my ears, but the sound wasn't just in the room. It was inside me. The walls pulsed. The air thickened, vibrating like a living thing. Then, without warning, the jar shattered. A shadow poured out, liquid and smoke all at once, swirling up and around Harrow, seeping into his skin. His eyes went black. His voice deepened into something monstrous. "It remembers your name now." The spiral erupted in a flash of light. Chapter 23, It Comes Through. The light from the spiral wasn't light at all. It was movement, a living, twisting current that bent reality around it. My flashlight dropped from my hand and rolled away, useless now. The air grew thick, humming like static, and then it emerged. Something vast. Something that shouldn't fit in that tiny chamber. It unfolded from the spiral like smoke forming muscle and bone. A shape too wrong to name, its surface rippling between liquid shadow and flesh. Eyes blinked in and out of existence across its form, each one opening just long enough to see me. And when it looked at me, I felt it inside my head. "You opened the way." The voice wasn't a sound. It was a thought so loud it drowned out my own. Mr. Harrow, or what was left of him, stood motionless, trembling, black veins crawling up his neck. He whispered through cracked lips. It needed a voice. "You spoke the name." The thing began to mimic me, its shape shifting, contorting into a rough version of my own body. My face, my eyes, my voice. "It's me now," it said, perfectly mimicking my tone. I stumbled backward, tripping over the broken glass, heart pounding. The thing smiled my smile and stepped out of the spiral completely. "You stay here." Chapter 24, The One Who Stayed. When the lights blinked back on, it was gone. The room felt wrong, like someone had shifted every wall an inch to the left. My body trembled, my breath short and uneven. I looked around wildly, but what I saw made my stomach twist. There, standing at the base of the stairs, was me. Not the twisted shadow from before, not a creature in disguise. No, it was me. Same clothes, same face, same scratch on the cheek from the mirror shard. He looked calm, composed, breathing steady. I stepped forward, whispering, "What are you?" He smiled. "You let it in." Then he turned and began walking up the stairs. My footsteps, my posture, like he had replaced me. Panic surged. I ran after him, shouting, but when I reached the top, the door slammed shut in my face. I pounded on it, screaming, and from the other side I heard my voice say, "You shouldn't have gone down there." The lock clicked. I was trapped. I turned back toward the basement. The spiral still glowed faintly. The air buzzed with something alive, something watching. And for the first time, I understood. The thing didn't want to kill me. It wanted to switch places. Chapter 25, The Last Recording. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it out. Or maybe I did, just not as me. I found an old tape recorder on the table beside the journal. The red light was still blinking, like it had been waiting for someone to press play. I hit record. My voice echoed faintly in the empty basement, a trembling confession. I don't know what day it is anymore. The spiral hasn't stopped humming. Sometimes I hear footsteps above me. My footsteps. Sometimes I hear my own voice calling from upstairs. I think it's living my life now. A low rumble shook the ground. The spiral pulsed, faintly glowing again. I tried destroying it. I continued, breath unsteady. I smashed the glass, burned the journal, but it just keeps coming back, like it's written into the bones of this house. The air behind me shifted. A whisper brushed my ear. My own voice, calm and detached. Stop recording. You're done now. I turned, heart slamming in my chest, and there I was, standing in the doorway, smiling softly, as if to comfort me. The recorder slipped from my hand, the static rising. The last thing it captured was my voice, or something that sounded like it, whispering, "Don't go down the basement." Then silence. Chapter 4, The Old Blueprints. Curiosity is a funny thing. It doesn't care how many times you're warned. In fact, the more people tell you not to do something, the louder that itch in your mind becomes. That night, I decided to do a little digging. Literally. In the small home office, tucked behind a crooked cabinet, I found a box filled with old papers, faded deeds, inspection notes, and right at the bottom, a rolled-up sheet of blue paper, brittle with age. The blueprints. At first glance, everything looked normal, the main floor, the attic, even the narrow hallway I'd walked through a dozen times. But when my eyes reached the lower section, something didn't make sense. There was no basement. Not just missing, it was never drawn. No stairs. No foundation depth. Just a note scribbled in the corner. Almost illegible. Sublevel not approved. Do not excavate. I stared at that phrase for a long time. Sublevel? What sublevel? I checked again, running my fingers over the faded ink. There, faint lines, hand-drawn after the fact. Someone had added a basement later. Someone who wasn't supposed to. Then, something strange. A small, circular symbol drawn near the center of the page. A spiral. And beneath it, written in shaky handwriting. Just 2 words. Still below. Chapter 5, The First Night. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that spiral. The one on the blueprint. Spinning slowly in the dark behind my eyelids. By midnight, the house had gone still again. The kind of stillness that feels too heavy. You start to hear your own heartbeat, your own breath. Every sound feels out of place. Then it came, the first knock. 3 slow thuds. From somewhere deep beneath the floorboards. I froze. My phone's clock read 3:07 a.m. It happened again. Louder this time. 1, 2, 3. I sat up, holding my breath. My mind scrambled for logic. Pipes, wood, temperature shifts, but deep down I already knew it wasn't that. This wasn't random. It was deliberate. The knocks were perfectly timed, evenly spaced, like someone signaling. I whispered into the dark, "Hello!" No answer. Just silence thick enough to make my skin crawl. I turned on the lamp. It flickered twice, then went out completely. And then, faintly through the floor, I heard it. A low hum. Not quite human. Not quite mechanical. Just wrong. It grew for a few seconds, then stopped. Everything went dead quiet. Except, right before I drifted into a terrified half-sleep, I heard one last thing. A single whisper, almost affectionate. Chapter 6, The Missing Owner. The next morning, I went straight to the local records office. I needed to know who lived in this house before me, who built that hidden basement, and why no one wanted to talk about it. The clerk, a tired woman with reading glasses halfway down her nose, scrolled through a database and frowned. 43 Ashwood? She muttered. That one again. Again? She flipped through a file drawer and pulled out a thin folder. Inside were a few yellowed pages, property transfers, a photo of the house, and a name, Elias Ward. Bought it in 1978, she said. Disappeared in 83. Police searched for months, nothing. His car, wallet, even his shoes were still inside. What about the basement? I asked, She looked up sharply. There isn't one. Her tone left no room for argument. She shoved the folder toward me. Look for yourself. Sure enough, every inspection report listed no basement. But the old blueprints in my bag said otherwise. As I packed up to leave, she leaned forward and whispered, "You should move out. Some houses remember too much." When I got home that evening, the house was quiet again. Until I noticed it, a dusty set of footprints on the basement door. Bare feet. And they weren't mine. Chapter 7, The Lock That Shouldn't Open. By now, I was jumping at every sound. Even the wind brushing past the shutters made me flinch. But the basement door, that was different. That door felt alive. I decided to check the lock. I don't even know why. Maybe to prove to myself that it was just a door, wood, metal, nothing more. But when I knelt down and examined it closely, I realized something was very, very wrong. The lock wasn't normal. It wasn't on the outside of the door like every other door in the house. It was bolted from the inside. Someone or something had locked it from down there. I tried the handle anyway. It didn't budge. But as soon as I touched it, I heard a faint click, almost like the sound of a latch sliding into place. Then the door shuttered. Just once. I stumbled back. I should have left it alone. I know that now. But something about that door, the way it seemed to breathe in the silence, it pulled at me. That night, I set a chair against it before going to bed, just in case. But at 3:07 a.m., the familiar sound came back. 3 slow knocks, and when I got up to check, the chair I'd placed against the door was on the other side. Started with a sound, faint, distant, and wrong. At first, it was easy to ignore. The old house made noises all the time. Pipes shifting, wood creaking, wind humming through the cracks. But this sound was different. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, like something knocking. They told me not to go down there. Everyone did. My parents, the realtor, even the old man next door who muttered something about the last owner never coming back up. But curiosity, it's a dangerous thing. It whispers in your ear, makes you believe you're the one exception. So one night I took a flashlight, opened that basement door, and what I saw changed everything I thought I knew about this place and about myself. You think you'd be brave enough to look? Or would you listen to the warnings and stay away? Chapter 1, The House on Ashwood Lane. It was supposed to be a fresh start. A quiet neighborhood, tree-lined streets, and that soft hum of cicadas that makes summer nights feel endless. Ashwood Lane looked like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. The sort of street where kids ride their bikes past sprinklers and neighbors wave from perfectly trimmed lawns. So when I saw the for sale sign leaning crooked in front of number 43, something inside me just clicked. The price was unbelievable, suspiciously low, actually. But the realtor brushed it off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Old houses have history, she said. Some more than others. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel it. That thick, still air that seems to remember every whisper and every footstep that ever passed through. The floorboards groaned softly beneath me, like they were sighing. Dust particles danced in the sunlight cutting through cracked blinds. And then, I noticed it. At the far end of the hallway, a door. Plain, unassuming, but slightly darker than the rest. This doorknob was cold when I touched it. The realtor's voice suddenly sharpened. "Oh, don't go down there." She said it casually. But her eyes, they said something else entirely. Chapter 2, Whispers from the Walls. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet, actually. I unpacked boxes, set up the bare essentials, and tried to convince myself that the creaks and groans were just the house settling. Old wood and temperature changes. That's what people say, right? But around the third night, things began to shift. At first, it was faint, like a sigh just behind the wallpaper. I remember standing still, holding my breath, listening. Came again. A murmur, low and uneven, almost like words. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. But when I stepped back, the whisper returned, clearer, closer, right where I'd been standing. I laughed it off, turned up the TV, told myself I was just tired. But that night, as I tried to fall asleep, I heard it again. A soft scratching, like nails dragging slowly against the wood inside the walls. Then, Something new. A sound I can't forget. 3 slow knocks. 1, 2, 3. Came from beneath the floor. I froze, clutching my blanket like it could protect me. Every hair on my body stood on end. And for a moment, I swore I heard a whisper rise through the silence. A voice, just barely audible, saying my name. Chapter 3, The Warning. By the 4th morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was trying to get my attention. I needed answers. So I did what anyone new in town would do. I went for a walk. Maybe meet the neighbors, maybe get some context about my bargain house. That's when I met him, Mr. Harrow. He was sitting on his porch across the street, old enough that the veins in his hands looked like faded blue rivers. His eyes, though sharp, too sharp for his age. Moved into 43, huh? He asked without looking up. I nodded. Yeah, just a few days ago. That's when he lowered his paper and said, almost too calmly, don't go down the basement. I laughed, because what else could I do? You sound like my realtor. She should have told you why, he said. He leaned in slightly. They sealed it off after the incident. Should have torn the whole place down. I wanted to ask what incident, but his expression froze, like he'd said too much already. Then, without another word, he stood up, shuffled inside, and locked his door. I stood there for a while, pretending the wind didn't just whisper something through the trees. The same 3 words, don't go down.